Imagine following every financial rule correctly and still falling steadily behind despite working harder today. Many younger adults feel exactly that reality, and economic numbers increasingly support their concerns. They studied harder, stayed longer in school, and delayed major purchases for stability. Yet, building meaningful wealth often feels dramatically harder than previous generations experienced before them. This isn't simply frustration talking. Something deeper changed beneath modern economic systems recently. The traditional path toward financial security still exists, but looks increasingly unfamiliar today. What once felt challenging now sometimes feels mathematically impossible for many younger workers. The strange part is that overall wealth has never appeared higher than today. Markets reached records, technology advanced rapidly, and productivity continued improving across industries globally. Yet younger generations often feel poorer despite living inside apparent economic prosperity today. The explanation begins with a question hiding quietly behind countless financial headlines today. Why does earning more money no longer guarantee meaningful wealth accumulation for younger adults? To answer that question, we need revisiting a very different economic era first. Imagine a young worker entering adulthood sometime during the 1970s economic landscape. Housing was expensive then too, just significantly cheaper relative to income levels. Education required money, but rarely decades of repayment obligations after graduation for students. Wages generally rose alongside productivity growth across much of the economy consistently then. A typical career often translated into steadily improving financial stability and wealth eventually afterward. Progress wasn't guaranteed, but the relationship felt relatively predictable and reliable for workers. Effort, patience, and time frequently produced visible financial results and security eventually afterward. That expectation shaped how entire generations viewed work, success, and opportunity throughout society. Parents repeated familiar advice because it genuinely worked for many ordinary people previously. Study hard, find stable employment, save consistently, and eventually purchase property for security. Those steps became almost a cultural blueprint for wealth creation across generations everywhere. Then, the economic environment quietly began changing beneath those long-standing assumptions over time. The advice stayed largely unchanged, but the underlying financial math transformed dramatically underneath. Younger generations inherited old instructions designed for a completely different economic environment altogether. That's where the tension begins between expectations and modern economic reality for many. The appearance appears familiar, but the outcomes increasingly look different from historical patterns. Many people blame individual choices, but structural forces influence outcomes enormously today too. Start with housing, historically the largest source of wealth for ordinary families nationwide. For decades, homeownership functioned as a powerful wealth-building machine across developed economies globally. Mortgage payments gradually converted earned income into ownership while building valuable equity consistently. Rising property values often amplified those gains dramatically over many years and decades. Older generations entered that system when housing entry costs remained substantially lower overall. Younger buyers face dramatically different conditions today across countless housing markets worldwide now. Prices rose faster than incomes in numerous cities for many consecutive years globally. Down payments grew larger while affordability steadily moved further beyond reach for buyers. Saving became harder because rent consumed increasing portions of income every single year. The latter still exists, but the first rung moved significantly higher than before. Education tells a remarkably similar story about changing economic realities for younger generations. Higher education increasingly became a requirement for many professional careers and opportunities today. Students pursued degrees hoping to secure better opportunities and higher incomes afterward eventually. Many succeeded academically but graduated carrying substantial financial obligations and debt burdens instead. Student debt isn't merely debt, it's delayed financial flexibility and opportunity itself today. Money servicing loans cannot simultaneously purchase appreciating assets or investments for future wealth. Years that once built wealth now often service educational liabilities and obligations instead. The irony becomes difficult to ignore when examining outcomes carefully over long periods. Society encouraged education while simultaneously making wealth accumulation harder afterward financially for graduates. Success sometimes arrived carrying a surprisingly expensive monthly bill attached for many graduates. Meanwhile, another major shift occurred almost unnoticed by most workers across industries everywhere. The relationship between productivity growth and wages gradually weakened over several decades significantly. Workers continued producing more value, assisted by technology, automation, and greater efficiency consistently. Yet, wage growth often failed mirroring those productivity gains experienced throughout the economy. The economy generated increasing wealth, but distribution patterns changed significantly over time afterward. More gains flowed toward capital, assets, and ownership structures rather than labor instead. That distinction sounds technical until you carefully follow where money ultimately accumulates today. Labor earns income primarily through work, effort, skills, and productive participation daily. Assets generate wealth through ownership, appreciation, and compounding returns over long periods. Modern economies increasingly reward ownership more than labor participation alone for wealth creation. This matters because younger generations generally own fewer appreciating assets than older generations. They entered adulthood after many valuable assets had already appreciated dramatically beforehand significantly. Stocks, housing, and businesses became increasingly expensive entry points for newcomers entering markets. Existing owners benefited while newcomers faced steeper financial obstacles and barriers ahead consistently. Wealth began compounding unevenly across generations as asset ownership became increasingly concentrated. The people already inside the system gained the greatest financial advantage over time. Everyone else needed increasingly larger resources simply to enter the wealth-building system successfully. Imagine arriving at a game after most points were already awarded to others. That's not exactly what's happening, but the feeling resembles that situation closely today. Timing became surprisingly important in modern wealth creation stories and financial outcomes today. Then, interest rates added another complicated layer to the wealth-building equation for generations. Following financial crises, borrowing costs remained historically low for many years afterward. Cheap money helped stimulate growth and support broader economic activity throughout markets globally. It also increased demand for homes, stocks, and financial assets everywhere simultaneously. Asset prices responded accordingly, as investors competed aggressively for available opportunities globally. Owners became wealthier as values climbed across markets worldwide over many years afterward. Younger buyers often discovered assets moving faster than their ability to save consistently. Chasing a constantly rising target becomes exhausting and discouraging over extended periods financially. Many households experienced exactly that dynamic repeatedly throughout their financial lives afterward, continuously. Wealth felt visible everywhere, but increasingly difficult to access personally for younger adults. Technology introduced another unexpected paradox into the modern wealth-building equation for younger generations. Digital tools created extraordinary convenience while expanding economic possibilities across industries worldwide significantly. They also intensified competition across many professional industries simultaneously through global connectivity today. More workers competed for opportunities in increasingly connected labor markets across countries globally. Companies gained access to broader talent pools than ever before in history. Competition can lower costs, including labor costs, under certain economic conditions significantly. Workers found themselves competing globally while assets scaled internationally and efficiently too. Capital traveled easily across borders, searching constantly for profitable opportunities worldwide today. Most workers could not relocate as easily as financial capital could internationally. That imbalance quietly shaped outcomes throughout the modern economy and labor markets today. Social media added its own powerful layer of confusion and comparison afterward too. Wealth became more visible precisely when achieving it became harder for younger adults. Luxury lifestyles appeared constantly on screens, creating distorted expectations about financial success. People compared their beginnings against someone else's financial peak repeatedly through online platforms. The result often felt like personal failure instead of broader structural economic change. Yet many struggles were shared by millions facing remarkably similar conditions and challenges. This doesn't mean wealth creation became impossible for younger generations in today's economy. It means the environment changed more dramatically than many people realized before recently. The deeper question remains unsettling as assets increasingly determine future financial security today. If assets keep outrunning incomes, can younger generations ever build lasting wealth independently?